Hey everybody, how's it going? Thanks for joining me this afternoon. I am Auron MacIntyre. Before we get started here, I just wanted to let you know that at Blaze Media, we've always stood for truth, freedom, and faith in God and country, and those aren't just words. It's a commitment to strive to live by every day. And now we want to help you carry that faith with you into your week, wherever you are. Starting this Sunday, we're going to be launching a new series called Sunday Revival with new episodes, you'll be able to hear every Sunday morning on Blaze TV if you're a subscriber. You'll get inspiring messages from leaders like Pastor Jack Graham or Pastor Alan Jackson from World Outreach Church. If you want to join us each week, you'll be able to discover new additional perspectives to help deepen your understanding of your faith. Regardless of what's going on in our chaotic world, Sunday Revival is here to help you grow, stay grounded in God's Word, and continue to strengthen your faith. So join us this Sunday on Blaze TV and start your week with purpose, faith, and inspiration. All right, guys, it is a wild day of news. A lot going on today. Some really powerful stories, really important stories, and some stories that are just insane. We're going to be getting to all of them. The first thing I wanted to address today is the announcement from the Trump administration that it's going to be reviewing all 55 million foreigners with USA visas for any violations. Now, it's great, of course, that the Trump administration is going through all these visa holders and they're saying, oh, well, we're going to be looking for whether or not these people have any violations that would keep them from entering the US. Have there any policies, any codes, any laws? Are they a threat to the country in any way? We want to take a closer look at all the people who have permission to enter the country in the United States. It says here in the AP article, the Trump administration said Thursday is reviewing more than 55 million people who are who have valid US visas for any violations that could lead to their deportation, part of a growing crackdown of foreigners who are permitted to be in the United States. In a written answer to the question from the Associated Press, the State Department said all US visa holders, which can include tourists from many countries, are subject to continuous vetting with an eye towards any indication that they could be ineligible for permission to enter or stay in the United States. Should such information be found, the visa will be revoked, and if the visa holder is in the US, he or she would be subject to deportation. Great news by the Trump administration. Good, obvious thing we should already be doing, right? If you have a visa, it's not just a free pass. You are here on our good graces. You are here at our discretion. And if there is in any way, shape, or form a reason that we don't want you here, even the smallest one, we should revoke it. And so going through this and making sure that there are people who aren't hate you, who aren't criminals, who otherwise are not undermining the United States, that is a great thing. However, it's the number that blew people away. It's great that the Trump administration is taking this action, but it's the 55 million number that blew people's minds. Because for a very long time in the United States, we've been told that the problem is illegal immigration. Now, we've always been given this number, 15, to 20 million people maybe in the country illegally. They used to say 10. They finally admitted maybe it's up to 15. But we know that even 20 million is probably a joke, right? Like Biden let in 8 million people at least during his presidency, most likely, just during that presidency. So that number already is almost half of the people who are theoretically here illegally before Biden even began doing what he's doing or was doing. And so the idea that we've maintained this steady like 15 to 20 million number is just insane. Now, of course, people go back, people die, it's not everyone who crosses the border doesn't stay here forever. But the idea that it's only 20 million at this point has been ridiculous. In fact, a running joke by people on the right on the internet has been, we need to deport 100 million people. We need 100 million deportations to fix the country. Well, when you look at these numbers of legal visitors in the United States, you start to realize, well, that might not be a ridiculous claim. Now, to be clear, 55 million visa holders does not mean they're all here at the same time, right? There are repeat entry tourist visas and other visas that allow you to come in at different times. And so not everyone who's technically currently issued a visa is here simultaneously. However, even if it's only 30 million people with another, 20, 25 million just hanging out with the option of entering the country whenever, that's an insane number. That's an absolutely insane number because you start to combine this what was has to be at least 30, 40, maybe even 50 million illegals in the United States at this point. And you start to realize that you could have a fifth or maybe even a quarter of the United States be here from another country. They could be here from foreign countries, either legally or illegally. And all of a sudden, the illegal immigration is not enough. It doesn't get the job done because we recognize that there's a massive amount of people who are legally more than most people could even have imagined. If you had floated to the average person, how many people do you think here are probably on visas? Not here legally, but not citizens. What would you guess the number would be? 10 million, maybe 20 million, right? That had the opportunity, that had visas at all. That'd still be crazy. That'd still be a crazy number, but maybe that 55 million people have visas for the United States. Absolutely insane. Absolutely insane. You can't have that level of foreigner in your country, whether legally or illegally, and expect to have a real country. For your country to be a home, it has to mostly be people from your country living there. For a country to be a real nation, to have a real sense of identity, to have a real kinship and brotherhood that allows you to operate as a society, you have to have some stability. If your neighborhood is a quarter B&B rentals, then your neighborhood is not going to be a place where you have like kids playing in the yard and everybody knows each other's names and they go to cookouts with each other and they all go to church together and they help each other out in times of need. No, it's going to be a bunch of people who are just transient, who don't give a crap about the houses that they're living in, maintaining anything. They don't care about the people next to them. They don't care about the community that they're currently residing in. You wouldn't have a real neighborhood. You'd just be basically a hotel area, which is what is happening, unfortunately, to many areas in the United States with Airbnb. But the wider point is, if you have that percentage of your population in any given moment inside the United States being foreign, then you're simply never going to establish yourselves as a real country. You're just an economic zone. You're just a place for people to go and make money or steal money, leech money off of people, and then send it back home or go home themselves. That's all you are at that point. So the idea that there are 55 million visas on top of whatever illegal immigrants we have in the nation is just absolutely insane. This is the kind of stuff that drives up your home prices. This is the kind of stuff that fills up your emergency rooms. This is the kind of stuff that makes your universities inaccessible to the actual population in the United States, jobs, everything, education. It's all filled up. Now, again, some of these people are just tourists. They're just going in and out, right? But ultimately, while they're here, they're using all the services and facilities. Now, you're always going to have a certain level of tourism that's good for your society to some extent, but you don't want it to make up an actual large percentage of your nation. You don't want a sizable percentage of your nation to constantly be moving in and out as if your country doesn't matter. Because remember, with our asylum laws, a lot of people just come in and they overstay their visas. They don't bother. They know they're never going to be hunted down or taken out, deported, forced to leave. You have a lot of people who decide that they're just going to come here and then pretend like they're in danger in their own country when it's just not true. They just want the free healthcare. They just want the benefits. They just want to live in a first world country. And of course, their country is dangerous to them. It's dangerous to everyone. It's a third world country, right? Like we have this insane belief that as soon as someone crosses into the United States, they're if they're on a visa, they're just going to have to turn around and go. Now, don't get me wrong. There are people for who that happens. There are people who get caught overstaying their visas. But let's be honest, most of the people who are doing that are the honest ones. The ones who well, I guess my visa's up, I have to leave. That only occurs to people who, already kind of have a sense of law and order and rule of law and a first world mentality, which a lot of people coming from third world countries obviously do not have. They don't see the need to follow the rules. They don't see the need for law and order. They don't understand why it would be incumbent on them to remove themselves once they've reached the end of their visa. They're not going to turn themselves in unless some, ICE agent pulls them out of wherever they're living. They're just not going to go. And so the fact that we have just this insane percentage in the United States raises all kinds of questions, right? Why aren't we cracking down very heavily on who can come in and out of this country legally? Forget, we obviously need to take care of all of the illegal immigration. Trump administration has been great on closing the border. I don't think they get enough credit for that. If the Trump administration had not closed the border, this country would be toast. Right. I mean, we might already still have a very, very rough time ahead of us. But if the Trump administration had not slammed that border closed, it would be done. If we were still getting Biden level of immigration into the United States, this country would be over. Right. And so the fact that Donald Trump was able to address that issue is very important. Now, the deportations, those have been going far too slowly. They've been happening. We've been getting some of the worst criminals out, the gangbangers, the abusers, all these people, and that's great. Those are the first people you should go to, right? I understand the legal strategy of basically securing a basis by which you should be acceptably deporting people and have a plan to where they're going. Obviously, we also know that just manpower wise, ICE was not large enough to affect the mass deportations that we needed previously. But now they have a huge budget. They have like a military sized budget, and they are aggressively recruiting people. If you're a young guy who's been complaining about the inability to have a future, not being able to make a good job, good money, not being able to go out there and earn the kind of living that could help you afford to start a family, that kind of thing, then ICE is there. And, that seems like a job worth doing as well, protecting our homeland and deporting people who should not be here, who might be threats to Americans. That's a pretty good gig. So, ICE is growing in manpower and in budget. And so I was more than willing to give the Trump administration a lot of time to ramp up these deportations. But, you got the budget, you're drafting the manpower, you've moved the worst people out. It's time to ramp up the deportations, right? So like that's really critical. But on top of all the illegal immigration talk, obviously we radically need to address the visa program, because the number of people entering the United States is just absolutely insane. It's out of control. Again, some of these people will just be tourists. There are others, overseas still holding the visa, so they're not here. But there's a large, large, large contingent of people here who are competing for jobs, competing for housing, competing for education, competing for healthcare, taking all of these additional benefits that they get from being here. Many of them will abuse the visas, overstay. So we just don't need these people here. We don't need, why are there foreign students here on visas when American students are having trouble getting into college and affording college? I mean, we know the answer. The colleges are greedy. We should just take their money, just seize their endowments, cut all of their federal funding until they're only servicing American students. Hold them hostage. The Trump administration is doing this over anti-Semitic talk. They could clearly do it over making sure that Americans get education in American universities. That should be pretty easy. I mean, personally, I think you should be raising these places to the ground. But if they're going to operate, then they should operate for the betterment of Americans. And that should be the most obvious goal in the world. So, the fact that we're still handing out visas for people to take American jobs, to go to American universities when American students can't get in, can't afford it, is just insane. It's just stupid. We should obviously not be doing this. So good on the Trump administration for, addressing this issue. I'm very glad that they're saying they're going to be continuously reviewing all of these visas, to make sure that the holders are not people who should not be here. But at the same time, we need to start talking about that number and getting that number down very clearly. Also, good news. Secretary Rubio also announced today that the U.S. will no longer be issuing any work visas for commercial truckers. For commercial truckers, obviously, the incident in Florida where two drivers, I believe from India, were driving this truck and trying to do this insane U-turn, ended up killing uh, three people, I believe, in that accident. After that they said, okay, we're done. There's no reason to be bringing foreigners in to drive trucks. I don't know, for people who aren't aware of this, the truck driving is one of the last like working class jobs that's relatively decent paying and is acceptable or accessible to like the average working class, especially white guy in the United States. If you haven't gone to college, if that's out of reach, if some of these higher education options are out of reach, and you still want to be able to make a decent living and afford a family, then truck driving is an option for you. That is, it's not a glamorous job, but it's honest work and it pays well. And there's a lot of guys who would just, drive trucks for a living and do well, even though they didn't get to go to college, this kind of stuff. And the fact that we are bringing in foreigners to compete with them is already insane. Already insane. Why do we need to bring in foreigners to drive trucks? It's the last bastion of like easy or relatively easy to enter working class blue collar labor that pays well in the United States, up there with the trades, right? And even probably a little easier than the trades because you don't need, getting a commercial license, takes some effort, but it's not, you don't need to spend years and years of apprenticing to kind of master that craft. So it's one of the few jobs that is still like well paying and accessible for blue collar workers. And the answer is, oh, well, then we need to give it to other people. These aren't jobs people won't do. Are you kidding me? I know. I've had family who are long haul truckers. Like these are people who are making a living for their family in a respectable way. And there are plenty of people who need to have access to that. I'm sorry, but these companies don't just get to drive down wages with foreign workers because they don't want to keep paying a decent wage to Americans. It's not okay. And so that in and of itself was already insane. But obviously, we see that when you're bringing people like that in, they may not be familiar with the laws. They may not be familiar with driving in the United States. They don't have the same cultural expectations. I don't know about you, but I have been to third world countries where people are driving and it is insane. Don't get me wrong. People are already driving insane in the United States, but you go to, go to a third world country and drive on the roads and it's just a free for all. It's just complete madness. There are no rules. There technically are driving laws somewhere, but no one's enforcing them. So these people are just, throwing things into reverse, driving, twice the speed limit, pulling all kinds of crazy turns. They have no respect for, the flow of traffic. And so like everything is just absolutely crazy all the time if you go to these other countries. And so if you bring in a bunch of people into the country who drive in that kind of environment, why wouldn't they think they can just pull a U-turn across, the middle of a median on an interstate with with an 18-wheeler, right? Like it's no crazier than whatever else they do when they're driving in their own country. And they bring that mentality here. So just telling them, oh, well, you got to pass the test. Well, okay, they passed the test. They technically did the paperwork, but that doesn't mean they're going to abide by it. It doesn't mean they care. And so the fact that these people are also, in addition to taking jobs that Americans absolutely want and need, and driving down wages that Americans are desperate to earn, in addition to all of that, they're a threat to the United States and the lives of the people here. And so, once again, great move by the Trump administration. I'd like to see them more widely apply this. These are not the only jobs that Americans are being undercut by people with these work visas. Foreigners brought in to take these jobs and drive down these wages and buy up housing and fill your emergency rooms and fill your educational systems, right? Like there are plenty of jobs that we could have far more candidates in America actually take if they didn't have this constant competition with the entire world. But I'm glad the Trump administration is at least taking these actions. And again, the simple fact that they told people, hey, there are 55 million visas out there. That's a shock enough. Like, just, whatever action they're taking on it, good. But just the shock of the fact that there are that many people in the country illegally or even legally, in addition to the ones that are here illegally, it blew people away, blew people's minds. So I think it's very important that the Trump administration took this action, but even more important that what this action uncovered was the fact that we have this absolute disaster of a visa system going on, that these numbers are just insane. All right. So the next one I wanted to talk about here real quick. Let me show you this one. So John Bolton received a nice little, pre-dawn raid this morning, or around dawn raid this morning from the FBI. John Bolton, of course, famously was has been very anti-Trump after working in the administration. A guy who really was in support of all the regime hackery towards Trump, was very key in attacking him at every area, was more than fine with the fact that Trump was raided, Mar-a-Lago, that the president was arrested, had a mugshot. More than happy with the raids on people like Roger Stone and others that were conducted by the Biden administration. Obama administrations, just people who have been abusive towards Republicans in general. However, today he was raided by the Trump administration. And it's still early. We're still not sure exactly all the details. But Kash Patel was out there, director of the FBI. And he was saying, FBI is doing its job. He said FBI agents on mission here, from the story on The Blaze. And from what we have heard, again, early order, so information's still coming out. But from what we've heard, John Bolton is being investigated because of his possible allegations of him leaking classified information. Which, remember, that's what the Trump raid was supposed to be about. Remember, they told us that Trump had the codes for nukes just like sitting in his basement somewhere, right? So the fact that that John Bolton is being raided for the same theoretical crime is very funny, very entertaining. And there's a lot of libs who are outraged. Oh, this is a revenge plot, and this is this is how fascism arrives, and this is the punishing of political enemies. And yeah, guys, right? Like, remember when we warned you? Remember when we told you, hey, you keep doing this, you keep this up, you are going over the Rubicon? The precedents that we're always being warned about setting, you're setting them? Like, you can't go back after this. You start raiding people, including the president of the United States, for what are obviously ludicrous allegations. Then eventually they have to do the same thing to you. That's the only option. There has to be payback. There has to be blood drawn. There has to be tit for tat. You can't just let the Democrats do whatever they want, and then when you're in office, you be the responsible one. No. You guys decided to start this, so we're going to finish it, right? Yeah, you're going to get raided. Your house is going to get turned over. FBI agents are going to slam through your door because that's what you did. It's going to be done back to you. Very simple. You punch somebody in the face, they punch you back. And so John Bolton gets his house raided on allegations that he has been leaking classified information, including in a book that he wrote. And so, we'll see where this goes. I've been saying, we've been getting all of these revelations from Tulsi Gabbard and Kash Patel about how the Obama administration coordinated with intelligence to undermine the Trump presidency, push the Russiagate hoax, fabricate everything. We've been told about all these different FBI agents who were, violating norms and taking sides, being political. We've had all of these revelations about, different actors, bad actors inside the Biden administration, but we've seen very little actual action. We've seen no heads roll. Now, a raid is just a raid, right? He could show up and nothing could happen. Remember, the FBI technically raided Joe Biden because he had some files in a garage somewhere, right? No, they didn't. They just walked in, basically said, "Hey, Mr. President, we're going to look around and take some of these boxes," and nothing happened, right? So just because they went to John Bolton's house doesn't mean that charges are coming. But if they do come, now we're in a different ballpark, right? Now it's the Trump administration playing a very different game, a game they absolutely have to play. So I hope this is an indication. I'm hoping this is an indication that ultimately we're going to see them widen this. We're going to see them widen this to people like Brennan and uh, all these other ridiculous uh, cronies that were involved in Russiagate and other violations. But you have to see this take place, right? It has to happen. And all the whining and all the complaining in the world from the left, you have to ignore it. These people did all of this to Trump. They did all of this to Republicans. They did all of this to what are often completely innocent people, simply for the purpose of sinking their political enemies. You cannot let that go unanswered. And if John Bolton was involved in leaking classified information, and I have every confidence, honestly, that he's the kind of guy, has that kind of arrogance, that level of arrogance to do exactly what he's been whining about Trump doing for years. If you do have evidence of that, that man needs to go to jail. You need to play hardball. You need to put these people in jail. None of it matters if these people don't go to jail. Anthony Fauci should be in jail. James Comey should be in jail. These people should be in jail. And so if John Bolton is the first guy they can roll up easily, great. Do it and make sure he goes to jail. Now, it's not enough to just raid the house. He needs to spend time in prison if he is guilty. And obviously, other administration officials from the Biden administration and from the Obama administration also need to go. It's very obvious. So I'm glad it's another good on the Trump administration. This was there's been some rough times for the Trump administration lately, but this today is a pat on the back, attaboy stream from the Trump administration. It's not everything we want for sure, but it is positive moves across the board. We're seeing positive moves on visas, positive moves on limiting who can come in to do jobs and be dangerous in the United States, positive moves on raiding those that violated the law and extract a political price from those who prosecuted Trump and others, other Republicans and conservatives. Big deal. It's a big deal. It's all first steps. I'm not here. Don't worry. I'm not going to be waxing eloquent on how amazing the Trump administration is just today. But these are all positive steps, and we should be giving credit where it's due and be encouraging good things when we see them. And these are all good things, and they all need to continue. They're all first steps. That doesn't mean that the job is done. It's not even close to done. Barely begun. But they're steps that other presidents wouldn't even bother to take. So good on the Trump administration. Very glad to see this. Want to see more. Want to see fewer visas, more visas being rejected, more people being deported because they violated the terms of the visa or should no longer be in possession of the visa. I want to see more jobs where we limit the number of foreigners who are allowed to come in and take them from Americans. I want to see more officials who were traitors to Donald Trump, traitors to the United States, who were working to sabotage elections and manipulate intelligence and harm normal patriotic Americans. I want to see those people pay. And so I'm glad to see the Trump administration taking action here. I'm very glad to see this. Again, it's not all sunshine or rainbows with everything Trump does, but today, lots of good movement. Also, as just a brief side note, there is now a movement. I believe a congressman just put it out. I'm sorry, I've immediately forgotten his name, but let me grab it real quick. There's a congressman who just issued a letter to President Bush. President Trump just issued a letter to President Trump asking, yes, Congressman Riley Moore. He issued a letter to President Trump asking that Pat Buchanan be given the Presidential Medal of Freedom, which I think is a fantastic idea. I already, did a piece. I released a video on this channel about why I think Pat Buchanan deserves a statue. I think we should be building more statues. I think the left tears things down. We should be building things up. We should be honoring great men who are conservatives with statues. But at least we can get Buchanan a medal, right? The Presidential Medal of Freedom is the highest civilian award the president can give. And Pat Buchanan is a guy who has fought his entire life for this country. When everyone else told him he was crazy, when everyone else told him he was a bigot, when everyone else told him that he needed to shut up and get in line and follow, what the Republican Party was doing. The fact that he was willing to stand up against those people and say, no, absolutely not. I will continue to fight for my people and my country and its well-being. And he was, pushed into the wilderness for many years, despite getting almost everything right in his predictions, writing very important books and these things. And so the fact that Pat Buchanan could be honored with a Presidential Medal of Freedom, I think would be really great. I think it's a great idea. I think we need to celebrate these people. And so I'm very supportive of Congressman Riley Moore's decision to push this, and I hope that they actually respond, that the Trump administration does follow up on this, because I think this is a very, very, very important thing to do. I think that it's the right thing to do, and if we don't honor our best soldiers, if we don't honor leaders who were right but were shoved to the side, then we'll forget their wisdom. And I think we should absolutely do this with Pat Buchanan. All right. So the next thing I wanted to show you is a video. Now, this video is very interesting because obviously I was recently on Tucker Carlson. And when I was on Tucker Carlson, we talked a lot about the nature of civilizations and understandings of the world, right? And that your different tradition, background, heritage, your religious values, these things, your language, they define the way you see the world. They define the way that you understand the world around you. And so when we're trying to interact with other people, we have to recognize that they often have a very different basis for how they have norms and expectations in society. And that, as I said on the show when I was with Tucker, the Constitution and the American system were specifically designed for specific people, a people with a specific way of life. And if you're not from that tradition, if you're not familiar with those norms, if this isn't the heritage you grew up with, the history you grew up with, the faith you grew up with, the rationality, the epistemology that you grew up with, then you have a very different understanding of the world. It might be difficult for you to become part of the American system. Now, some people can, right? There are people who can accept that way of life and join it after generations. Their children's children can become part of that story and that legacy. But the people themselves give birth to the culture, not the other way around. And so it's really critical when you're looking at how to manage society. What should we bring in a bunch of people from across the world? Does it matter? Will a guy from England assimilate easier into the United States than someone from Madagascar? Is there any difference between somebody in Southeast Asia and somebody in Finland when it comes from their ability to kind of integrate into the US? These are important questions, and ones that if you just assume everyone is the same and everyone thinks the same and everyone acts the same and everyone understands the world the same, then you could fall into the error of believing that everyone can just become American. Everyone is just a potential American waiting to raise their hand and give the Pledge of Allegiance and swear an oath to the United States and then become a U.S. citizen. But that's just not the case. When we talk about the way of knowing things, the way of understanding things, the way of being, we're talking things that are tied to a people, right? And so this video has been going around on the internet. I'm going to play some of it and we'll talk about it as we go. But this is a young Black woman from Africa discussing African philosophy. She's talking about, I guess, one of the premier African philosophers. I'm not super familiar with African philosophy, so I'm not going to pretend to be any kind of authority there. But to her, this philosopher is very important, and she says wildly different understanding of time, just a radically different understanding of reality. So let me play some of this real quick.
If I told you that for many African societies, the concept of the future doesn't exist, and that instead of time moving forwards, time actually moves backwards. This was the work of...
So already we see a very, very different understanding of what time could be. Time does not move forward. We're not progressing through time. Time moves backwards. Now, I think both of these are kind of wrong in a way, but the point being, this has radical implications for the way you organize your society, radical implications for how you understand how you should, treat each other, planning for the future. All of these things are very critical. And if you don't have the same conception of time, you can't plan around them. Like, we all assume our conception of time is universal. Of course, this is how I experience time. This is how time works. But she's saying, no, in Africa, we believe time works entirely differently. Now, we know that something like language is a barrier to communication and custom is a barrier to cooperation. But time is like one of the most fundamental understandings necessary to coordinate anything about our civilization. And she's saying, we don't even have the same conception of that. Like, we can't even grasp time in the same way, because we have radically different understandings of how time works. That makes being a part of each other's civilizations very, very difficult. This is a radical difference, a difference so radical it makes cooperation basically impossible. So let's hear a little more.
Of John Bolton, one of Kenya's and Africa's greatest philosophers. And in 1969, he wrote something that completely reimagines the way we think of African time. Mbiti says time is a two-dimensional phenomenon with a long past, vibrant present, and virtually no future. Using Swahili words, he describes the two dimensions of time. The first one being sasa, the now, the recent past, and the immediate future which can be experienced. The second dimension is zamani. Zamani is the vast, endless past where all events eventually go on to live forever. But the future in African thought, it barely exists because...
So the future in African thought, according to this preeminent philosopher in Africa, does not exist. The implications of that are vast, right? They are almost too numerous to take time to go through. I mean, if you do not have a future, how do you understand planning for something? How do you understand a time preference, a lower time preference that would allow you to build civilization? How do you understand denying yourself today so that you can thrive tomorrow, or that your children or your grandchildren can benefit from long laboring work that you put in and planned for and denied yourself in the future? None of that exists. It's all gone. The idea of you need to maintain things because you're going to need them in the future, it just doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. You have the past, you have the long dead past where things go after they've happened a very long time ago. You've got the present, you've got like the near future, the things that are just about to happen, just around the corner. But the idea of like a long off future that you need to prepare for doesn't exist. There's no conception of it. And if you don't have a conception of the future, how do you plan for it? How do you put aside money? How do you put aside food for the winter? Well, in a lot of situations, she'll explain, Africans haven't had to, so they don't have these experiences.
Time is made up of events. Time has to be experienced in order to be real. So because we can't conceptualize events tied to the distant future because they haven't been experienced yet, then therefore the future cannot constitute part of time. And this is why, according to Mbiti, African languages, at least the East African Bantu languages that he studied, don't have a word to describe the distant future.
No word to describe the distant future. They don't have the language for the concept, much less practice the concept. There isn't even a word to explain the concept to them. because they do not have it. It does not exist because time has to be experienced in this way. It has to be experienced. If you can kind of have a short idea of the future, like the immediate future, because it's about to be experienced. But the idea of a long-term future that you might never experience or will only be experienced in a decade or something simply does not exist. Okay. If you've read Alexander Dugin, you're actually pretty familiar with this fact, actually. Alexander Dugin talks about this in the Fourth Political Theory, that time is phenomenological and that different peoples experience time in radically different ways. And so if you're from a culture that experiences time in this very tribal way, a time that has to be, there is no abstract time. There's no understanding of time as this separate thing, but time is only what is experienced. Then you have a vastly different understanding of it than someone who has a culture entirely built on time, right? So much of Western culture requires the understanding of time. How are you going to make a contract to fulfill in the future if you don't understand that there is a future? How do you set time zones and delivery schedules? How do you make agreements? How do you plan to do shipping across, half the globe? How do you land planes if you don't understand the future? If you can't plan because you don't understand time that has not been directly experienced? There are huge implications for this. And again, Dugin has been talking about this. This is and if you've read Heidegger or any of these, you understand, the understanding that you have to experience a lot of this stuff, and the direct experience is a critical part of understanding. And so this is known and talked about, but most people just assume that everybody experiences time in exactly the same way. And then, and this is why, again, when I was on Tucker, I said, it's critical to understand the phrase self-evident truths means for people inside your tradition, inside your society, inside your sphere of knowledge, people who share your faith, your heritage, your history, your language. When we talk about self-evident truths, we mean things that are self-evident to us as a people. Because what's self-evident to you, there is a future, we need to plan for it, might be completely not evident at all to someone who's a preeminent African philosopher. Like, it might not even occur in the slightest that is self-evident, because it is not self-evident for them, the way they live their lives. And to be clear, Dugin says we shouldn't be chauvinist about this at the end of the day. They experience things differently. They have a different belief system. They have a different understanding. And that's the way their lives are lived. And we won't be able to force our beliefs on everybody. You can say, democracy is objectively the best system, or this is the way I experience time, and you'll be right for you. But it's going to be difficult for them to understand that, to grasp that, because the truth is not self-evident. There's an entirely different set of beliefs working under the surface that you don't even understand. You can't even get your head around. I mean, if you have an understanding of the future, then how do you even live your life interacting with people who do not? What does that even look like? How do you even have discussions? Right? We'll make a deal and figure this out in a year. That will mean nothing to the people you're talking about. They do not have the conception. We need to delay this process so we can have more later. Does not compute. Does not make sense. We have not experienced later yet. So we cannot possibly know that we need that. The only way we'll know it is when we get there. All of these have vast, again, implications for the way you run society.
In African time, according to Mbiti, events create time. seasons, ceremonies, a conversation, those moments produce time, and people produce as much time as they need. An example that Mbiti uses from the communities that he studied is that a year is measured based on 4 seasons, 2 dry seasons, 2 wet seasons. So a year is only over when those 4 seasons have taken place. So a year could take 365 days, 390 days. It doesn't matter the number of days in a year. What matters is that the 4 seasons have taken place.
So she's explaining here the belief that time is something that only occurs after certain events have happened. There's a certain set of events that occur, and then time has taken place. And people create time as they experience these events. Again, very phenomenological understanding of time. The time is created as you're experiencing these events. No abstract understanding of time. No idea that there's time outside of the individual experiencing things. No idea that, a time could be an abstract set of, days. No, time is these seasons, these experiences. And so if a season is extra long or extra short, then time changes. Time is not this static thing you measure. It is something that is very dynamic and can change radically depending on how you are experiencing the world, what happens, right? Very different understanding of time. In ways, has some truth to it, but makes it pretty hard to, again, make train schedules or, land airplanes or ship things across the ocean, because those things all require really abstract understandings of time. I don't know, what season, how long the seasons are going to be for the next 6 months, but I need to make sure that this shipment is going to get somewhere in 6 months. And so whether or not the seasons pass or not, that ship still needs to arrive, because if the ship doesn't arrive where it needs to, then it can't pick up the next thing and move to the next port. And so the planning out of time in an abstract and measurable manner is pretty critical to the Western understanding. To do any of the trade or any of the capital activities that we do, you need to have this more rigid understanding of time. So in a way, our system might only be functional for people who understand time that way. The entire global trade system might be completely unmanageable for people who do not have that conception of time, who cannot abstract time out into calculable units that are reliable. And in her understanding and in the African understanding of this philosopher, that is not how time works. And so people who do not have a word to describe this phenomenon are going to have a very, very hard time working inside our system, adopting our customs. And they're going to lose out in the larger global economic picture, the geopolitical picture. And this is what a lot of people actually complain about on the left, right? They say, well, your understanding is very Western and imperialistic or whatever. And you can take the imperialism to the side for a moment, but it is very Western. Yes, it is Western centric. It is racist to the extent that it favors people of European descent who understand the world in this way. But that's also why it works, because that's how the understanding of time allows you to behave. And so if you have this civilizational understanding of how time works, then you will structure your society in a radically different way than people from Africa. And maybe, that's good for the African civilization. Maybe that's the way they want to live. But it will fall behind people who have a different conception of reality, a different understanding of time. Again, you don't have to hate people or, even make fun of people or something because they have this different understanding. But you definitely need to factor that in when you're deciding who should be in your country and whether or not your system can be applied to other people.
This is in contrast to the Western view towards time, where time is a commodity, something that can be spent, saved, wasted, or lost. And according to Mbiti, this is why if foreigners come to Africa and they see people sitting under a tree, they would remark that, okay, why are these people wasting so much time? But in African thought, that sitting under a tree, it's not wasting time. It's either waiting for time or producing time. For me, I think this Western.
So if you're sitting around, you're not wasting time, you're producing time. You're waiting for time. So the idea that time is a commodity, that time is something that is precious, the time is something that you should allocate thoughtfully to activities that better you or society, this does not exist. There is no understanding that time is a limited and finite thing to be allocated properly. This simply does not occur. Again, that's not bad. That's the way that they want to live, the way that they have lived their lives, the understanding their community has. But it's just not compatible with the Western understanding of how time works. This is why you tend to judge people who act that way as lazy in the West, mainly because a lot of us have this understanding that, like, no, we should be using our time productively. Time is something that is precious, that is limited, that can be allocated to good and bad ends. And that if you are just sitting around not using your time at all, then you end up creating a worse society. Now, to be clear, there's an unhealthy version of this, right? So you might say, "Oh, well, that African understanding of time is very bad because it creates lazy people." But of course, there is famously people talking about the Protestant work ethic and Americans working too hard. There is probably a level of that where Americans burn themselves out. Now that's why we build great things, right? We build amazing things because we work so hard and because we have a vision of the future. We understand time in this way. We understand it could be wasted and we don't want to. But at the same time, we can harm ourselves. We can live less fulfilling lives in some ways because we're so busy grinding all the time. I got to work, 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 work. And if you're doing that work for greatness, that's awesome. But if you're just channeling it into like some kind of corporation or, some kind of complete waste job that doesn't do anything for people who hate you or aren't producing anything of value, well, I mean, it's admirable that you're working in a way, but, you're also just kind of wasting all that for nothing. So, there are downsides to this, but, I want to live the Western way of life. That's who I am. That's how I understand the world. That's how I understand time. It's what's natural to me. It makes sense because I was born into this culture. It's what my father and my grandfather and my great-grandfather, that's how they understood the world. So it's how I understand the world. And I want to live in this way. And if she wants to live in a different way, that's fine. But then we probably aren't going to be able to share values. We're not going to share an understanding of the good, the way that the world should work, the way that we should order society. Because there's a fundamental difference at the core of our understanding of the world.
Idea of time as a commodity is what drives this Western obsession of progress, development, and some promised future. And this difference shapes everything from politics, economics, to how we live our daily lives. Because in African thought, the golden age isn't in the future, it's actually in the Zamani. According to Mbiti, the future is only a shadow until it comes to the present and then it flows into the Zamani. So in that way, time moves backwards. We are not the ones who move forward into time.
So again, just a very different understanding of how the world works. You're not moving forward into time. You're not supposed to make tomorrow better. There is no idea of progress. I have my own issues with progress, but we won't get into that now. But there is no idea that you should put off today to put off getting something good or fun or whatever you want today because of tomorrow. That's not how it works. The golden age is in the past. The future doesn't really exist until it's been experienced in the present. And then those events move into the past, and that's where all the good things are. So it's a fundamentally rear-looking understanding, right? It's not looking forward. It's not future-oriented. It's not because they don't have a word for it. It's not forward-facing. It's always the past. It's always the things just come out of the future. They're experienced, and then they move into the past. And that's how time flows. Radically different understanding. As she says, this is all, the idea of technological progress and, science and ambition and achievement. These things are all tied to Western understandings of how time works. And if you're someone who has only ever experienced other people with this grasp of time, then you'll just assume that this is how the entire world sees it, because why wouldn't they? It's so obvious to you. It's self-evident. The truth is self-evident. But this truth is as self-evident to her. She sees this. Many Africans see the world exactly this way and think it's foolish to understand it any other. Again, you don't need to mock it, you don't need to hate it, but you do need to understand it. You do need to factor this in when you're trying to grasp, should we have immigration? Should people with this belief flood the UK or the United States? Are they compatible with those civilizations when they don't understand the just metaphysics that are inherent in our understanding of the world?
So, of course, Mbiti wrote this from a theological point of view because he was trying to explain the nature of African religion. But my main takeaway from the parts of the book that I've read.
So important here, this is based in African religion. So it's the religion that is informing then this attempt to philosophize, right? As it often does. Totally normal. But you need to understand religion is the core as to why Africans understand the world this way. And he's looking at time and explaining it this way so that he can make it jive with his theology. Because most differences at the end of the day are theological. And so this is very important, okay? Because a lot of people say, oh, this is just genetics, or this is just, and no, it's a mixture of so many things. You know, the identity is yes, it's heritage, but it's also religion, as she said here, central. It's language. You know, as she said, we don't even have the word for the future. So all of these different key factors in identity are working together to make it more or less impossible for people who think this way to operate in a Western society.
Is that unlike Western cultures and religions with end of the world myths, African time has no end. Seasons, years, birth, marriage, death, it's all a cycle. Asante kwa kutazama, tafakari hayo, and I'll see you in the next video.
All right, so like I said, important video. I think pretty eye-opening for people who aren't familiar with the fact that other peoples do indeed have radically different understandings, not just of small things, right? It's not like, oh, well, you know, maybe they have a slight disagreement over what it means for free speech, or, you know, no. Fundamental, core, bedrock assumptions about reality. How does time work? Is there a future? Can you plan things? Is time something you can waste? Should you be looking to better yourself in the future? Should you be planning for your children and grandchildren? These are all very fundamental things that you cannot share values with if you do not have this basic grasp on how the world works. How can you even discuss shared values, an ideology, a propositional nation with people who cannot abstract time? With people who do not believe that abstract time exists? How do you have a conversation, much less share a civilization based on abstract principle with people who cannot abstract time? That's a big one. That's a big one, right? And that doesn't mean, again, that these people are bad. It doesn't mean that people who hold this belief or think this way are like lesser people. I'm not saying any of that. But obviously there's a difference, and a difference that has to be understood. And that difference creates limitations on how you can interact. People who don't understand time cannot participate in a global economy. People who don't understand time the same way that you do cannot understand laws that were created to ensure the future. It just doesn't exist for them. And that's okay. That's the way they live their lives. It's not, wrong in that sense. I think it's wrong. Yeah, I think time exists. I think there is a future, but that their understanding of it is not malicious. They're not trying to hurt anybody. And if they can't, update that understanding of the past, present, and future, then they probably just aren't going to work in your society. And that needs to be okay. You just need to be okay with that. You don't have to force everyone to believe what you believe. You don't have to conquer the world and turn everybody into a liberal democracy who understands time the way you understand time. You don't have to do that unless your goal is to rule the world, in which case you do need to get rid of the particular beliefs that peoples have. some that might seem wild and completely incorrect to you. But that doesn't mean you should go out and crush those people and, force your belief on them. You just don't have to, because if you try, then what happens is the situation we're in right now, where we import lots of people who have fundamentally different understandings of religion and abstract values and time, money, economics, all of these things. And of course our civilization doesn't work. How could it work when you have this large of a gap in your understanding? All right, guys, let's head over to the questions of the people here real quick. Bram Zwingle says 100 million deportations is now the liberal position. Yeah, like I said, it's mind-blowing. That number, 55 million visas, is it's shocking. That was the big story, right? Like, I'm glad that the Trump administration is also reviewing those visas. That's good. But just the sheer number itself is insane. And so you recognize that, you're going to need to deport a lot more people than we thought. Now, the news has also come out that a little over 1 million people have self-deported since the Trump administration began. Great news, right? A lot of people said, oh, the Trump administration, they're not deporting people fast enough. I'm one of those people. But remember, they don't have to deport every single person. That self-deportations are a big part of the strategy. If you put enough pressure, you pull enough of those visas, you make it hard for people to get jobs, healthcare, education, benefits, you dry up their ability to rent a house, that kind of stuff, they'll just go home. They'll just go home because it won't be worth being here anymore. So you don't have to physically deport 100 million people, but you do need to physically deport a decent amount of people and create a scenario that makes it so the rest of them need to leave. And that also includes vastly cutting the number of visas that we'll issue to people. Tiny Stupid Demon says every politician of the prior 60 plus years is responsible for this. All of them, every single one. Yeah, you can't just blame this on Democrats, obviously. Like, Republicans have notoriously been the handmaiden to this. They'll make little noises about, immigration, that kind of stuff, but they never take action. Trump is the first GOP president my entire life to take real serious action on the border. And so, you should really hold all of these people accountable. I doubt we'll get justice for every Republican and Democrat leader that was involved, but they should not be let off the hook for this. Based Hillbilly says $10,000 a year to hire an immigrant, 40% income tax for migrants, no citizenship unless they're married to an American for 20 years, 40% remittance tax. So this is like a basic barrier, right? You need to pay up front if you're a company to hire a migrant to ensure that there's an additional fee. So we know you're not just going to get them for cheap labor. We need a high income tax on the people who are here, if you have them at all. Absolutely no citizenship. Marriage for 20 years, 40% remittance tax, all seems pretty reasonable. I don't know if I'd have to think about the different numbers exactly and how I'd want to apply it. But these are all perfectly reasonable barriers to put between employers and immigrants, so that, if they're hiring people, they're absolutely doing it because they need them. And those people are not getting citizenship just because they're here, and they are paying a large amount of taxes. Like that is key. That is key. Theod Saninja, I always say it wrong, I'm sure, says we need to return to mid-century immigration laws and philosophy. By the way, the name is pronounced Theo. Oh, fine, he finally did it. Okay, Theo, as in King Theoden, and Saninja as in, sorry, I can't. Let me take down this video. Puninga. Okay. Well, I would not have guessed that, but thank you. I will probably get it wrong again, but I appreciate the clarification. And yes, we need to radically change our understanding of immigration, 100%. Let's see here. Liturgical Sooner 25 says, oh, thank you very much for generous donation. He says, this finally red-pilled my family when the news broke. They now are supportive of deporting most visa holders. This news is apocalyptic for a lot of big corporations. The more these kind of facts get out, the more normal people will fully be awake. Yeah, it is true. Like I'm glad the Trump administration is taking some kind of action on this issue, but the biggest thing is just letting people know the numbers. No, this is really how many people are in your country. No, this is really what's happening here. no, you really do vastly underestimate how bad things are. I am with you. I think that this is a number that'll blow a lot of people's minds. Tiny Rick says, I am both black and white pilled. Yeah, that's kind of the thing with this, right? Like the number is so insane that it's easy to be black pilled. Like, oh, how could things have gotten this bad? At the same time, it's white pilling that people are finally seeing this, knowing about it. The reaction is insane. Trump administration is taking action on it. So, mix of things. I think the actions are white pilling, but the reality of where we were is a little black pilling. I understand that. He also says, we'll continue to build, still Buddhist, but founded church. Keep doing what you do. Well, thank you very much. I believe you should absolutely convert to Christianity and follow the one and only Savior, Jesus Christ. There is only one God, and you should believe in him. That said, I am glad that you like what we're doing here, and I hope that you are drawn to the Christian faith. Tiny Stupid Demon says, but these are just equally valid indigenous ways of knowing. Maybe none of us really have a future. Perhaps time comes from somewhere else. Martin Heidegger and Nick Land, call your office. Yeah, well, again, I think that I think this understanding of time has issues. But my main point is just I don't want looking at the way that they understand their reality to be something that we are hostile about. Because again, if you look at the works of someone like Spangler, he says this. He says every civilization, they experience math differently, they experience language differently, art. All of these things are so drastically different. It's very difficult for civilizations to understand each other. So this understanding of the world has been around for a very long time. And, there are great civilizations that understood things differently. So, he goes in, Spangler goes into why the Greek civilizations could never have developed the number zero, right? They just didn't have that understanding to come up with the concept of zero. It doesn't mean they didn't do great things. It didn't mean they did amazing things. It doesn't mean they aren't a great culture worthy of respect. But they were just never going to understand the concept of zero. They were never going to develop that inside their culture. Most people would still look at the ancient Greeks and say, that's an amazing civilization. They did amazing things, but they're never going to do that thing. They're never going to have that understanding. And that's okay. That's just how it is. There will be things that our civilization does not understand because of the way it's structured that will be obvious to some other civilization. And that is okay. That's okay. The problem is when we demand everyone has exactly the same worldview, exactly the same understanding, and we are willing to crush the differences between peoples in order to obtain that. Mostly Peaceful Merch says they can experience things differently in their own country. America is for people that plan for things like breakfast. Again, yeah, I tend to agree. I am happy for people to have those different understandings. I think it's fine. I don't need to look down on them. I don't need to hate them. But yeah, I don't really want people who can't understand time the way that I understand time to be part of my world. Because I need things to happen on time. I need my lights to come on. I need my food to arrive. I need to make sure that I can go to meetings and plan things. So I need people who understand time the way I understand time. Doesn't mean I need to hate people who don't. But if you're wondering why you're having a very difficult time coordinating with people of other cultures, well, this is why. Because there's fundamental differences you cannot account for if you don't grasp that even the nature of time can be up for question with other peoples. All right, guys, we're going to go ahead and wrap this up. I want to thank everybody for coming by. As always, if it's your first time on this channel, you need to go ahead and click subscribe on YouTube, the bell and notification so you know when we go live. If you want to get these broadcasts as podcasts, you need to subscribe to the Auron MacIntyre Show on your favorite podcast platform. And if you do, please leave a rating or review. It really helps with the algorithm magic. I want everybody to have a great weekend. And as always, I will talk to you next time.